So what I'm going to go today is just go over why you get pigmentation, what is the reason behind it, all the different factors that affect it, and then just looking at some key ingredients that you need to look at to treat the pigmentation and to maintain pigmentation. If you've got any questions, we will obviously take some questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So it is kind of a two-way conversation, so it's not just going to be me talking. So if you do have any questions at the end, or if anything doesn't make sense to you and you'd like me to explain again, I'm more than happy to do that. So what I'm going to do now is just share my screen with you, just to call up the presentation so you have a little bit of a visual as well as listening to me chat about it. So let's just do that. If you can just give me a thumbs up, Rachel, if you can see my screen. Is that good? Perfect. Great. So we're going to talk today about AlumierMD. I am the account manager for Rachel. So I'm going to discuss with you what AlumierMD is all about, and also obviously focus on pigmentation as the skin condition of discussion tonight. So AlumierMD is a medical skincare line. These are the 7 core factors or unique selling points about Alumier. So one being clean chemistry, corrective percentages, medical grade ingredients, targeting skin conditions, and elegant formulations. We also offer a comprehensive chemical peel portfolio and hyper customized protocols. We really want to deliver the results that you so deserve to achieve from skincare. So I'm just going to touch on a few of those points just to expand on it for you to understand. So the first one is looking at clean chemistry. So there are many cosmetic products out there, and Alumier's core focus is to ensure that we can give you a product that will deliver the results that you should expect, but to ensure that we're giving you a product that you can use long term that won't have the harmful side effects or toxic effects to your health. So our products are formulated with an approach to clean science. What that means to us is that we have our formulations that are free from sulfates, dyes, color, artificial fragrance, and perfume, because these ingredients ultimately sensitize the skin and are not good for our health. We also make sure that our ingredients are sourced from a sustainable source, and making sure that we can deliver the cleanest products available to you. So clean chemistry is one of our unique selling points about AlumierMD. We're a medical grade skincare, and we are the only medical grade skincare on the market that entire range has a focus to clean chemistry. As I mentioned, we're called a medical grade brand. What that means is that we are still a cosmetic. We're not a prescription medication type of skincare. However, we're an active cosmetic. So we use corrective formulas, and our actives are carefully chosen and formulated at clinically validated levels. So this means that the actives that we use are in higher percentages than something that you would buy in the high street or just over the internet. A very easy example to explain this to you would be really looking at the ingredient vitamin C. So vitamin C comes in many different forms, and we use the medical grade vitamin C, which is called L-ascorbic acid. L-ascorbic acid is the bioavailable form of vitamin C, which means it's the form of vitamin C from a molecular structure that the skin recognizes and can uptake and utilize. So if you used, for example, a 10% orange extract, it would still be deemed as a vitamin C serum, but of course will perform very differently on the skin in comparison to L-ascorbic acid. So when we use vitamin C, we use the form L-ascorbic acid in the optimal level of 15% at a certain pH. And we also use a crystallized form of vitamin C that is separated from the bottom of the bottle. So only when you're going to use it do you depress this down. The vitamin C crystals fall into the bottom over here, and that ensures that your vitamin C is as active as possible, because obviously vitamin C oxidizes and goes brown and is ineffective. So we want to make sure that we can deliver the freshest form of vitamin C on the market to you at a 15% concentration, and we use L-ascorbic acid. So that is the difference really between medical grade versus cosmetic skincare. Clean chemistry, so just a few ingredients to touch on. So we don't use chemical filters in our sunscreen, because we believe that you should be using a sunscreen daily through winter as well as through summer, and I'll explain to you why in a minute. And so because we want to make sure that you're using a sunscreen daily for the rest of your life, we avoid chemical sunscreen filters, things like your oxybenzone or your avobenzone, because they have a link to endocrine or hormonal disruption, and they also are an environmental contaminant. They're not allowed to be used in places like Hawaii and the Great Barrier Reef because of the effect that it has on the coral. It actually bleaches the coral. So it's important that we are not only using something that has clean chemistry in relation to your health, but also that is not a toxin for the environment. So we also avoid the ingredient called parabens. Parabens are a family of preservatives used in pharmaceutical and personal care industry. Again, there is evidence to show that they potentially could be an endocrine disruptor and also an environmental contaminant. And then we also avoid the use of retinol palmitate, or also commonly known as vitamin A, for use during the day. We only recommend use of retinol, which is the medical grade vitamin A, to be used at night with a sunscreen during the day. Because there's links again when you use retinol palmitate in the presence of the sun or UV, that it may speed up the development of skin tumors and lesions. So because of this risk, we make sure that we avoid that use during the day. So that's just a few points around clean chemistry. There are over 1,500 ingredients in cosmetic science that is really not great for you to use from a health perspective. So let's get on to pigmentation. Hyperpigmentation is what we're talking about today. It can present itself in very different ways on the skin. It can also be developed at different stages of your life. So we have either melasma, which is often seen on the upper lip or on the cheek area. And this is often symmetrical and is also linked to hormones. So you may find that you develop pigmentation on the upper lip when you start the contraceptive pill, for example, or you may have got pigmentation during your pregnancy or through menopause. There's often a relation to hormones and how it presents itself on the skin. It also looks very different to this type of pigmentation. So this type of pigmentation is known as post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. So it's darkening of the skin in different patches as a result of trauma. So for example, after acne or friction on the skin, or a type of scar, any kind of trauma to the skin will cause inflammation in the skin, and then as that skin heals, it results in deposits of pigment known as hyperpigmentation. And you can see the difference between melasma and post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation presents itself quite differently on the skin. Then you have what we know as photo damage, which is sun damage, and again presents itself very differently on the skin. Sometimes you have these solar lentiges, or known as age spots, so you're darkening patches or an overall sort of mottled, speckled effect on the skin. This is a result of long-term sun exposure. So you have three types of pigmentation: hormonal related, trauma related, and then sun related. And of course you can have a combination of all three, but you can see it shows up differently on the skin. So if we look at the structure of the skin, so this is a section of the skin, so I'll just explain the different layers. Down here you have your subcutaneous layer, so your fatty layer. Then you have the dermis. This is where your collagen and elastin fibers lie, where your blood supply is, and where obviously the follicle of, or the pore of the follicle extends into, and your blood supplies. So this is known as the dermis, where your collagen fibers are the ones that we always want to focus on here, to obviously stimulate those collagen fibers to help to improve the appearance of lines and wrinkles. Then you have the upper layer of the skin known as the epidermis, and you have many layers within the epidermis. This is at the top called the stratum corneum, what is obviously visible to the naked eye. So what happens in the case of pigmentation is you have a little cell down here called a melanocyte, and when the skin is exposed to UV naturally, what happens is this melanocyte gets excited and it starts to deposit pigment basically horizontally across the cells. And the reason it does that, and when you go in the sun you get a bit of a color, is because it's producing pigment to protect the DNA of the cell. So that's its normal function. That's what it's supposed to do when you are exposed to UV. However, when you have been overexposed to UV over many years, or you've been in the sun for longer than a few minutes, this cell gets too excited. Instead of it depositing pigment horizontally, it shoots pigment vertically up and is then seen as dark marks on the surface of the skin. This cell can also respond to hormonal fluctuation, which will cause it to create excess pigment. And it can also be affected by trauma to the skin that will again result in excess pigment and too much activity. So this is how it looks. It looks like a little spider really at the base of your skin. And as it gets affected by hormones, trauma, or UV, it gets excited and it starts to deposit pigment into the surrounding cell over here. So down here, it starts to produce pigment. And then if there's too much trauma, sun exposure, or hormonal influence, it shoots pigment straight up into the skin. And that's where you see those dark marks appearing on the surface of the skin. So it's obviously a very helpful cell because it's protecting the DNA of the cell, but too much overproduction of melanin, we start to see that hyperpigmentation developing. Depending on how long that trauma has been, or hormonal imbalance, or overexposure of the sun, will depend on how effectively you can treat pigment. So if you have hyperpigmentation for many, many years, sort of 30 plus years, some of that pigment may drop into the dermis. And so to help, to treat that is pretty tricky, almost impossible, but you can definitely lighten and brighten the skin. So if we look at what we need to do here when we're treating pigment, the first thing is that we need to protect the skin from UV, because UV is the very thing that stimulates that little cell. So if you are trying to treat your pigmentation and you're not avoiding sun exposure, or you're using a sunbed, or you're not using a sunscreen on a daily basis, it's almost a waste of your time, because the UV is the very thing that stimulates this melanocyte. So we're going to talk about sun signs just for a second, because this is your number one product if you are wanting to treat pigmentation as well as aging, because of course the sun also breaks down those collagen fibers in your dermis. So when we look at the rays that are penetrating from the sun, you've got two main rays penetrating through. One is called UVB. So we remember the B for burn. So the one that is giving you a tan or a burn when you go in the sun. And the other ray is called UVA. And we use that little A as the aging ray. So you can see UVA penetrates through the epidermis into the dermis and will break down these collagen fibers. Whereas the UVB one stops there, right where that little melanocyte is, and it's stimulated to produce a tan or a burn. So we need to protect the skin from both UVA and UVB. The UVA penetrates through the epidermis as well, so it will also affect that melanocyte. And we're often concerned with UVA because people don't realize that they are being exposed to UVA. So for example, like a day today, which was gray and a bit drizzly, you'd probably think, well, I don't need to use a sunscreen now because, I'm not feeling that burn or that heat from the sun. Whereas actually, that UVA ray is always about. So if there is light, there is basically damage. And that is why we say it's so important to use a sunscreen through winter and through summer. In summer, we reach for the SPF because we can feel the heat of the sun. We know that we're going to get a sunburn if we don't actually use a sunscreen. But actually, we need to be protecting our skin from both UVB in the summer and then UVA throughout the year. We also recommend that we use physical filters. So we use zinc oxide and titanium dioxide because they protect against both UVA and UVB. I'm sure you've heard of broad spectrum SPF before, and that means that it is protecting the skin from both UVA and UVB. Whereas if you look at some common chemical filters, you will see, for example, oxide, which is a very, very common one, will only protect you from burn, but has no effect on UVA. whereas something like zinc oxide will protect against UVA and UVB, and your titanium dioxide protects you from UVB and part of UVA. So we use a combination of both of these, whereas a lot of cosmetic products will potentially use a combination of chemical filters to create that broad spectrum SPF. So they might use this one and this one to protect it from all those sun rays. So it will be a broad spectrum SPF, may get a 5-star rating. However, we want to avoid chemical filters because we want to use them on a daily basis. We want to avoid that sort of harmful effect to our health. So we have various SPFs with Alumier, and we sell them as your daytime moisturizer. So you'd cleanse the skin, use whichever serum is relevant to your skin condition, and you would finish off during the day with your SPF based on your preference, really. So the Moisture Matte is a mattifying SPF. It also doubles up as a lightweight foundation. Really good for any skin, normal to oily skin. Great product if you're not somebody who wants to use multiple products, because it is your day moisturizer, your SPF, and it doubles up as a lightweight foundation. It comes in 3 different tones. So pink undertone, which is the ivory, a neutral, which is sand, which I use every day, and then amber, which is more for your tanned Mediterranean skin types. We also have Clear Shield, which is for all skin types, particularly your oily acneic skin or rosacea skin, because it has vitamin B3, which is a really soothing ingredient. There's no color and it's completely matte and it's very lightweight on the skin. Or if you have more of a drier aging skin, you might want to have more of a dewy finish. And so we have Sheer Hydration, which also has vitamin E. So it's really moisturizing, and it comes in a versatile tint, which is a light color wash, or an untinted if you don't want any color. So there's really great option depending on your preference. So that will be your number 1 anti-pigmentation product, because remember, UV is the very thing that stimulates that little cell called a melanocyte. Your next ingredient to look out for is vitamin C in the L-ascorbic form. The reason for this is because vitamin C helps to really quieten that cell down and stop it from producing too much pigment. It also helps to protect that little cell from free radical damage, from UV, from stress, from pollution, because your skin is constantly under free radical attack, which means those cells have been damaged or oxidized and broken down from various factors. So your vitamin C will protect that melanocyte, but will also help to just calm it down and stop it from producing excess pigment. It won't cause the skin to go white or light. It just calms it down so that it goes into more of a normal state. We then also have a product called IntelliBright. So IntelliBright works on all the different parts of the cell where pigment is produced. So I'm not going to go into the detail of the science with you, but there's many different reactions or cascade of actions that happen within the cell. And this IntelliBright complex has many different ingredients that are going to work on all different sites of the cell. So it's going to work on the nucleus of the cell. It's going to stop the production or reduce the production of these little melanosomes that transfer into the surrounding cells. It's going to work on this melanosome production. It's going to work on the transfer of those melanosomes into the surrounding cells. So it's a really good product and would be used morning and evening after you've used vitamin C during the day. You'd apply your IntelliBright over the top with your SPF, and then it needs to be used twice a day. It's most important that you are always using products to treat pigmentation twice a day. So you have 2 options. You have IntelliBright Complex, which has a host of ingredients to help to break down that pigment, reduce the production of pigment, and it could be used twice a day. Or it could be used, well, there's a great before and after was showing you IntelliBright. Or it can be used in combination with Even Tone. So you either use IntelliBright morning and evening, or use IntelliBright during the day, for example, and Even Tone at night. Doesn't matter which way you do it. The most important thing is that you're dosing the skin really every 12 hours with ingredients that are going to help to suppress that excess pigment production. Even Tone is really good for an aging skin, because it also has low molecular hyaluronic acid, which has the ability to really affect the dermis and really help with that collagen plumping up of the skin. So even tone is a really good one if you are concerned with aging and you have a little bit of pigmentation. Whereas if your sole focus is maybe pigmentation, you can use one in the morning and one in the evening. If you're a bit on a budget, you can buy one and use it twice a day. It just has a host of different ingredients to keep that skin responding to treating that hyperpigmentation. Even tone also works on the different parts of that cascade of production of melanin or of pigment. It just has different ingredients working at different sites of that cell. So as I said, most important that you're dosing the skin twice a day, whether you're using one in the morning, one in the evening, or you choose one based on your preference, but it's important then to use it twice a day. Now, retinol is always in here in terms of treating pigmentation. And retinol has many benefits to the skin. It has the ability to increase cellular turnover, which is important for aging. It's also really important when you're treating pigmentation. It also has the ability to stimulate collagen production to help to reduce the appearance on fine lines and wrinkles. The reason why it's so crucial to treat pigmentation is because when you're using the ingredients that are in even tone and Telebright and vitamin C, you're reducing that production of pigment and making those cells have less sort of little melanosomes, so little bits of pigment in them. And really what you want to do is push those newer skin cells up and off and speed up that whole action by lifting off those dead skin cells where there is excess pigment. I'm just going to go back a few slides just to show you what I mean on that structure of the skin. So when you have pigmentation and you've got this cell producing excess pigment, and then you start to calm it down and it starts to sort of shrink down a little bit, and now it's depositing less pigments into the surrounding cells. You want to push these skin cells where it's working on up and off, and you want to increase that cell turnover rate as quick as you can. Before the age of 25, that cell turnover from down at the bottom to the top is 28 days. And as you get older, that process slows down. So most people start to notice pigmentation in their 30s and 40s, where now that cell turnover process is about 40 days. So the quicker you can increase that cell turnover, the quicker you can lift off that pigment. So exfoliation is really, really important when you are treating pigmentation. And that's why retinol should always be added into your routine, along with the ingredients that are going to suppress that melanin production. Of course, professional treatments are going to speed up that process as well and also enhance the results of the home care. So chemical peels, along with something like IPL or laser treatments, you can do a combination of treatments, but chemical peels, what they do is they loosen the bonds just between the dead skin cells on those upper layers, and those skin cells will lift up and off, and that will encourage these cells down at the bottom to be pushed further up. So you really, again, want to increase that exfoliation. So remember, your even tone and your Telebright and your vitamin C is working on this little melanocyte to shrink it down, stop it getting from so overexcited, and then it's depositing less pigments into these surrounding cells. Now we want to push these up and off and get new healthy skin cells to the surface quicker to brighten the skin. When you are doing regular exfoliation, the penetration of your active ingredients are also going to get better into the skin because it doesn't have to travel through all these layers of dead skin cells. So ultimately, your home care products will work more effectively in the skin if you have a good cellular turnover. Of course, chemical peels have other benefits as well. It also helps to stimulate that collagen production to help to reduce the appearance of lines and wrinkles. You have a smoother, softer, more radiant complexion if you have regular chemical peels and exfoliation. And of course, you can combine chemical peels when treating pigmentation with things like laser or an intense pulse light that are ultimately going to heat up those excess pigment that sits in these cells and really ablate it and make sure that that lifts off. So you can always combine chemical peels with other treatments as well. And I always believe a combination of home care and chemical peels or other treatments will really give you a quicker result. Also bearing in mind, the older you are, the longer it's going to take to see results because of that cellular turnover. And so often the question I will get asked is, how quickly will I see results? And that will depend on how quickly is your cell turnover? And as I said, the older you are, the slower that cell turnover is, the more that cell has kind of got into a bad habit over many, many years. And what we're trying to do is re-educate that cell essentially to stop it from producing excess pigment, calm it down a little bit. And that takes time if it's been in that state for many years. So it's better to treat pigmentation as soon as you see it versus years and years later. Also, with regards to melasma, which is your pigmentation as a result of hormonal imbalance, it's also important to look at that, because often, for example, if you have started the contraceptive pill and develop pigmentation, it's as a result of that hormonal change within your body. So sometimes you need to address that to really get a good effect from your home care. So hormonal pigmentation, also known as melasma or chloasma, is a quite tricky to treat in comparison to something like your post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, which is much more superficial, tends to be newer pigmentation, and you get quite a good result. In terms of your photo damage pigmentation, years of exposure to UV will depend on what age you're going to have decided to treat your pigmentation. So the longer you leave it, the more tricky it is to treat. With regards to chemical peels, I always just show this picture just to know the sort of worst case scenario that you're going to expect. Your skin is not going to be left red and raw and beetroot. It's just going to have mild exfoliation, encouraging those healthier skin cells to the surface. So of course, we have a full hyperpigmentation routine. The purpose of today's call is just really to give you an overview and understanding of the ingredients that you need to look for when treating pigmentation. And of course, Rachel or Sasha could give you a real bespoke routine based on your skin condition and concerns. This is just an example of pigmentation after a patient has had treatments for about a 3-month period, as well as home care. And then just showing you as well, just another patient. Of course, the older you are, as I said, a little trickier to treat. What we're trying to avoid is when you start to get pigmentation, you start to get this little mottled effect. And if you leave it and you don't treat it with using ingredients that are going to suppress that melanocytes, and you don't use sun UV protection in form of SPF, that little mottled effect starts to become those solid patches. And that's really what we're trying to avoid. So if you are, let's say, in your 40s or 50s and you're only starting to treat pigmentation now, and you're only just starting to protect your skin, you will get a lightening and brightening of the skin, but you may not get complete clearance of your pigmentation because it's been there for so many years. But what you do want to do is maintain it to prevent this mottled effect becoming solid patches, because that's much more difficult to treat and of course cover up with makeup. So I always believe that, you know, treat sooner rather than later. But if you are sort of in the later stages, you really want to be able to maintain, create that radiance and hydration, brightening the skin, and prevent sort of this full patches of pigmentation that is really guaranteed to occur on the skin if you left it, because over time this mottled effect will kind of join and become those solid patches like over here. So it is important to really treat as soon as you can. So of course we have, through your online consultations with Rachel, Sasha, or in clinic consultation, they'll sign you up to our portal, so you can purchase products either directly from Rachel's clinic, or you can buy them online through the recommendation of the clinic, and they can obviously follow your hyperpigmentation journey through this portal. And then of course, now that we've got a date, and the 14th of April is when it's all going to happen, is of course you can start to prep your skin with products to treat pigmentation, get that exfoliation going with retinol, so that when you come in for your chemical peels, you're going to have a much better result because your skin is prepared for treatment. There we go. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can see you all again. Has anybody got any questions for me? I know that was quite heavy science-based, and I tried my best to make it as easy as possible to understand. All good. So the point of today's really is just to give you an understanding. Of course, it's important that each one of you have a thorough personalized consultation with Sasha or Rachel just because every skin is different, everybody's in the different stages of their life. And with Alumia, we believe that a thorough consultation is important before trying any of our products to make sure that you get those results that really you do deserve after sort of, you know, spending that money with the clinic. Over to you, Rachel.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paula. Sorry, my internet dropped out. I don't know what happened. So, but no, that was fantastic. Really, really informative and useful. And as always, like Paula said, Sasha and I are available to do virtual consultations. They've been working out really well with clients to help them, you know, at least maintain their skin during lockdown period. So it's not going to be too much longer, but
get back in there.
Yeah. So yeah, good news this afternoon that we're back open on the 14th of April, which really is amazing, and there's light at the end of the tunnel for everybody. So I know Rachel said earlier that she's already got bookings going, which is amazing. So
yeah, we've had loads of people email already this afternoon going, yay!
So good news for everyone.
Paula, just a really quick question. What are your thoughts on the whole blue light thing on your skin? Like, I've read so much recently about, you know, everyone spending so much more time on laptops and devices, screens, especially during lockdown. Do you think that there's any connection there between kind of damage to the skin and overexposure?
Yeah, I think there is. I think there is, because obviously you have a spectrum of light, and based on the wavelength of the light, it's going to depend on how, if and when it can penetrate into the skin. So the blue light does sit within that spectrum that we've just spoken about. It also goes beyond that spectrum. So SPF will protect to a certain degree against blue light. There aren't any real official clinical trials done on blue lights, so there's no kind of hard evidence to show that. However, if we just take the science behind the wavelength of blue light in comparison to the wavelength of UV, it does kind of sit within that spectrum and a little bit further along. So based on that, yes, I mean, you know, SPF is important to protect against blue light. I mean, you know, I think always, you know, when you see a TV being recorded and you see that flashing that's coming off the TV, I mean, that can only be not so great for us, you know, when you see it coming off, when you see it being recorded. So yeah, I think there is some truth behind that. In terms of hard evidence and clinical trials, there's not much available, but just based on the science of the wavelength, yeah, I'm kind of personal opinion and agreement with it can't be the best for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always wear my SPF anyway, but I think we've discussed before, I'm always really, really, really surprised about the amount of people that are still very much in that mindset that they don't have to use it unless the sun is shining, which to us seems like totally alien, right? Because this is our business, but it is amazing the amount of people that
really. And I mean, it comes down to marketing. You know, when you go into Boots and it's summer, suddenly all the SPF is right in the front, but when winter it's not. So, you know, there's not enough education around it. We all know, you know, you go to the beach and you put SPF on. That's just what you've always done since a child. You know, it's not something that you do on a daily basis unless, you know, you're the daughter of a skincare specialist. My kids have had SPF on every day. So it just comes down to education and being in the know. And, you know, I always say you don't know what you don't know. And that's just as simple as that, really.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, honey. If anyone wants a complimentary virtual consultation, just ping me either in the chat or via our WhatsApp or email, and we can get that organised for you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining, and enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll catch
Thanks so much, Paula.
Take care.
Bye, darling. Thank you.